Quick demo of this video tutorial. I will show you how to create a login system in MVC application using session. We will discuss points like how to create a login form in MVC with required validation. After entering username and password, if user click on login button and if username and password is valid, we will show dashboard for him. Then we will discuss how to store and retrieve logged in user details. Finally, we will implement logout for the user. Apart from these, we will discuss how to block unauthorized request into our application and user timeout configuration. Hi friends, welcome to .NET Mob. In this video, we will discuss how to create a login page in C# MVC using session. Other than the session management system, there are other ways to implement user authentication such as Windows Authentication Mode, latest ASP.NET Identity, OWIN authentication. I chose session management system because of its simplicity so that every beginner can follow. I will try to explain each step that I followed, and if you have any doubts or feedback, please comment below in comment box. So let's get started. This is my Visual Studio 2013. We will create a demo MVC file project to explain the steps involved, even though you can use the same steps for any version of MVC. This is our login page design. It contains two text boxes. One is for entering the username and one for entering the user password. After filling these two text boxes, user can log in by clicking on this login button. Otherwise, he can clear the text boxes by clicking on the clear button. Before designing the login page, we want to design our DB. DB design can be done with Visual Studio itself, but I use Management Studio for DB design. First of all, you need to connect to your SQL Server instance. After that, right click on database, then new database, name your DB here, click on OK. You can see the newly created database under database here, login database. Now we need a table to store user details. For that, right click on tables, click on new table. First column will be user ID, then username, worker 50, password, worker 100, and I'm going to set user ID as table primary key. Also, I need to set the column as identity specified. For that, go to column properties, then his identity is to be yes. So in SQL Server, identity specified column values will be inserted automatically by SQL Server. We don't need to insert values into user ID. It will start from 1 and incremented by 1 as default. And so it will be like 1 2 3 4 5 6, and it will be like serial number. So it is easy to maintain that uniqueness of the column. Okay, now we need to save the table. For that, you can click on save here, name your table, click OK. So the newly created user table will be there under use tables, and I want to insert some test data into the table. username as .NET Mob, password will be passion. That's it. Now we have one user in the table .NET Mob with password passion. Okay, that's it. We are done with SQL Server DB part. Now we need to start creating MVC project. So let's flip into Visual Studio. Click on File, then New, then Project. Select Web under Visual C#, then select Framework 4.5. Then using this ASP.NET web application, you can create MVC5 applications. If you check Visual Studio 2012, you can see that MVC 4 applications can be created using this template. So in this video we will be going with MVC 5. So I selected web ASP.NET web application. Select the location where you want to save the application. Then name your application here. Now we need to select a template. Here we have two options. One is MVC and other one is empty. In case of MVC template, it has some predefined controls and views and some DLLs also. And for the simplicity of the video and to basically understand the MVC login system from the scratch, I am going for MVC empty template. Select MVC here, then click on OK. Let's talk about the empty template. Other than the web config and related files, we only have the root config file here, and it defines how we need to map our application URLs. So here you can see that, and this is the only part you need to focus now, and it defines our application URL must start with controller, then action followed by the ID, and it defines the default parameter, and it is like home as default controller and index as default action. ID is optional parameter. If you have query string, you can pass it as the last part of the URL. Okay, and here we don't have any controller so far. We need to start creating controllers, and instead of default home controller, I need login as default controller. Okay, and let's create the first controller. So that right click on controllers, then add controller, and we need MVC controller empty, add. You can see that controller as the large part of controller, so you don't need to change that. That's how the controller is named. Okay, so we need login controller. Click on add. So that's it. So here you can see login as default controller, index as default action. So if you open the application, it will load this index action. Now I'm going to create an ADO.NET entity model for our database login database to make use of our user table. For that, right click on model, then add new item. Under Visual C#, select data, then ADO.NET entity model. Then name our model as login data model. Click on add. Select generate from database. Next, then select the database. Enter your SQL Server instance name here. Then select the database, login database. Click on OK. Then next. Here we need to select the objects that we need to import in our entity data model. So in this case we need our user table. So check the table, click on finish. This is the diagrammatic representation of user table in entity model. Inside the login data model you can see a file user.cs. Inside that you have a class with name user, and it has three properties: user ID, username, password, like the user table columns. And we will be using this class as a model for user table. And in this application we have only one controller, login controller, and it has default action index. When we open this application in our browser, it will load content of this index action. So we should return a view that return this login page. So when we return a view without any parameter, it should return a view with the name as that of the action. So this should return a view with name index. In our application we don't have any view so far, so we have to create index view. For that, right click on index, then add view, then name view as index, keep empty template. We don't want any layout page, click on add. Like you know, in MVC views we will be using either a model class or a view model class. In this case we will be using this user class as a model. So you can define at the top of the view page as model. Let me copy the namespace dot user, and this layout equals null defines this view is not a partial view, this is a complete view. And this line defines the document type as HTML, then starts with HTML tag, then head tag. Inside this meta tag we defines the meta tag for viewport, and then we have the title. We need login as the title of the page, and inside the body we will be creating a login form. I would like to enclose whole login form inside a div with ID login div. In MVC Razor we can create forms using statement and begin form method. So it will be like this: using HTML dot begin form, then inside that form method as post. I would like to enclose whole form elements inside a table for proper alignment. Table has two columns. First row will be app name, let's give text decoration as underline. In the second row, we will show label and text box for username. So it will be like HTML dot label for model dot username. So this label for method shows label for the username, and in the second column we will show the text box for the username. So it should be like HTML dot editor for model dot username. This HTML helper class editor for will show text box or multi-line text box for properties having data type string. If the property is a boolean value, it will show a checkbox. Like that, this helper class will help us to create HTML elements based on their data type. So in the next row we will have elements for password. So it will be like HTML label for password and text box for password. In the last row we will have some buttons. First column will be empty. So first button will be the submit button as login. Second button will be reset button to reset the form elements. That's it. Now we can run this application and see how it looks, the login form. To run the application without debugging, press Ctrl F5. So that's it. The form is ready. Now we need to add some flavors into the login page to make it professional. First of all, I need to position the form in the center of the page, and we want to give a border for the form. For that, we can give inline style inside the head tag. I would like to copy predefined style that is made for this tutorial so that we can save some time. Let us check how it works. Yes, it works. It positions the login form in the center of the page, and it gives a form border. If you look into these two labels, username and password, these labels are created using the HTML helper class label for. And in this case, instead of username, we need a space between user and name, so that we can do in the user model class. We have to define the display name here inside the display name using the display name attribute. For that, you need to add a namespace system dot component model. Okay, this namespace. and inside this you can say we want to show it as user space name. So now we need to build by clicking on Ctrl Shift B. Otherwise you can build by clicking on build solution, then reload the page. Here the problem is solved. Now if we check the password text box, it shows the entered characters as it is. Normally password text box will not show the exact password, instead of it will shows the dots. So we need to define this text box as a password type, and for that we can add here the data type attribute. You need to add this namespace system.componentModel.data annotation. Inside that, data type equals password. Okay, that's it. Build the solution, reload the page. Now check how it works. Okay, in case of any HTML form, there should be a post URL, so that all these form elements that are entered into these text boxes will be sent. So in this case, if we check the inspect, we didn't specify the post URL here or action. In case of forms, action will be the post URL. So in this case, in our form, we didn't specify our post URL. So we are going to do that. First of all, we need an action for the post URL. It will be authorize return view. Generally in MVC, by default all actions will be of the type get, and we want this authorize action as post, so we can define it as post action by adding the http post attribute before it. So we are going to set post action authorize for the login form. So we can do that by passing the action and controller name here. We can pass the action name authorize as the action name here, then the controller name, that is login. So the post URL for the form will be login authorize, so it will be here. So this password and username will be sent to this action. Okay, now if you build and then reload the page, and if you check the inspect, you can see the action as login authorize. Data will be sent to the authorized action of the login controller. Now let's add some validations into this form. In this login form, we need to add required validation for username and password, because These two fields are mandatory to submit a login form. So let's check how we can do that. We can do that by adding required attribute in our model class. So we need username as required. So we can add required attribute here. Required, then error message. This error message will be shown when the validation error occurs for this username. This field is required. Same in the case of password. It should be a required field for the login form. Error message will be same. Okay, and this error message will be shown under the username and password as a new row. So we need to add a row below the fields. So under username we need to add a row to show the username validation error message. HTML validation message for model dot username. Same for password also. In order to work this validation as a client validation, we need to add some script files, like we need jQuery library, then the validation script file jQuery.validate, then we need jQuery validate unboosted. So that's it. Let's build the solution and reload the login page. I'm trying to submit the form, so you can see the error message here. And in this case we need this to add some CSS to make this text color as red. So if we check the inspect of this validation, you can see these fields has a class validation field validation error. So we can use this class for styling the validation error messages. Now let's add text color for the error message. Sorry, color as red. Now let's reload the page. Let's check how it works. So if you add username, the error message vanishes. Same in the case of password also. This is how we can add validation error messages in MVC. Now it's time to submit this login form. Like we said, after submitting the form, it will send the form element form values into authorized action inside login controller. So in this authorized action, we will be handling the login submission. The submitted form values will be of the type user class. That is our class that we used for model purpose. So this authorized action must have a parameter of the type user. Now inside this authorized action, we need to check is there any user exists with given username and password. For that, we will be using our ADO.NET Entity model. So we will be using this login database entities class to query. So let's start using login database entity. Var user details, db.users var x such that x.username equals entered username and x.password equals password first or default. If there is any user with given username and password, the user detail row will be here in this variable. If there is no such user, the user details variable will be null. So if user details equals null, we need to show the error message like wrong username and password in the login form. For that, now we need to add one property to just showing the login error message. So here we can write string login error message here user model dot login error message something like wrong username or password. So we just need to send this updated model into the login form. For that, we can write return view name is index, then the updated model. Now we just need to show this login error message inside our login form. For that, we will be adding a row before our submit buttons like this, tr then td with code span 2 so that it will take 2 column space. It will take 2 column space, and we will be having a label with class field validation error so that the error message will have a text color red, and HTML helper class display for model such that model dot login error message. Now let's try to run the application, and I'm entering some wrong username and password here. Submitting the form. Yes, it works. Wrong username or password. Inside this if block, we have handled the situation when user enters wrong username or password. Now what if the case if entered username and password is valid? So that will be handled here in this else block. We will save the user ID inside the session with key user ID. User ID will be there in user details, and normally after login successful we will show the dashboard or something like the dashboard page will be shown for the user after his successful login. And in this case we will add one controller, home controller for dashboard. Home controller, click on add, and let me add uh, view for the index action too, and I'm going to display dashboard here inside the h1 tag. So after the successful login we will redirect the user into home controller index action. So it will be like this: redirect to action. First one will be the action name, second parameter will be the controller name, and we don't need this return view. And let me run this application now. Going to enter valid username and password .NET mob. Password will be passion. Click on login. That's it. Now let me close these tabs from our application. So there is no more tabs from our application, and I'm going to exit this process from IIS, and let me run the application now. Now you see we are in our login page. So if someone going to enter the URL for home controller, home action, yes, he can log in without entering username or password. So we want to block unauthorized requests. For that we can do something like here: if session user ID is null, it means user is not logged in. So in that case we will send the response for our login. So the user will be sent to login page. Login index. That's it. Okay, let me run the application again, and if I try home controller URL, yes, we send it back to our login page. So in that way we can block unauthorized requests into our application. There might be a lot of views in your application, and it's not a good approach to copy these lines in your views, in all your views, to check whether user is logged in or not. Instead of that, you can use a layout. In almost all pages there might be a layout page, so you can move this code into that layout page so that you can reduce the redundancy in our code. Okay, there are some websites, when you log in into the site, and you were not using the site for next 60 minutes, and after that if you reload the page you may need to re-log in into the website. Same case will happen in our case also. It's because of session timeout in our case. We will talk about the session timeouts in the later part of this video. Normally session timeout will be 20 minutes in our case. So if user login into our system and he is in dashboard and he is idle for the let it be 30 minutes, and if we try to reload the page he will be redirected to login page, because after 20 minutes the session will not be valid, so the session for user ID will be null. So this will also help in that case also. Now we are going to implement our logout part. For that, let me add an action in our login controller, public action result logout. So basically inside the logout we will abandon session. Let's call session.abandon method. So that will clear all the session variables, like session for user ID will be set to null, and that's it. That's all about the session. And after that we will return redirect to action, that is our index action inside the same controller login. So that's it, and let me add one button or anchor tag inside our dashboard for the logout. Sure, at URL action, this is how we specify hyperlinks in MVC. First parameter will be action name logout. Second one will be the login, this is our controller name, and show logout as text. Let me run the application now. Entering user name and password. Yes, now we log in, and let me log out. Yes, that's it. If you try to log in into home controller, then index action, it will redirect into the same login page. Let me try now. That's it. After successful login, we saved the user ID inside session with key user ID. Like that we can save other details of the user. So you can, if you want to save his username, you can save like this, username as key, or you can use any other key as you like. User details dot username. Okay, after successful login you may need to track the current user ID, so that you can do here or somewhere in your C# code, like and user ID equals the same session. Same key must be used to retrieve the value, and you need to cast it as int. Okay, like this. If you want to show the current username inside the dashboard that you can do here, like username as session username to string. Let me run the application now. Login with username.net mob. Yes, you can see the current username here, .net mob. So far we have discussed all related topics to login system. Now I would like to discuss about session. Basically, session is created per user. That means session is created, a separate session will be created for each logged in user. If a user login from USA, there will be a separate session for that user. If there is another user from UK, there will be another session, separate session for that user. Basically, session will be valid by default. Session will be valid only for 20 minutes. After that, session will not be valid. So in that case, user need to re-login into application. If you want to change this session timeout, you can do that in web config file like this. Session state timeout is 30 minutes instead of 20. So you can add this line inside the system.web tag in your web config file in your solution. That's it, guys. We have discussed all points related to login system in MVC application. If you have any doubt, please ask in the comment box. Thank you very much for watching this lengthy tutorial. Please be subscribed to my channel .NET Mob for awesome videos like this. Please support my channel by liking and sharing this video tutorial to your friends. Have a nice day. Bye.